Friends, so today we are going to study history of Rasellas, and this history of Rasellas why I have given because it is being written by Samuel Johnson, who is very famous for the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography. So let's begin. We'll be giving introduction and I will try to understand what is there in history of Rasellas. So Samuel Johnson, we all know, is a very famous man of letters in English literature, and we have lot of contribution by him, and he born on 18 September 1709 to 7 September and his that time is year is 1784. Often called Dr. Johnson was an English writer who made lasting contributions as a poet. He was a playwright, essayist, moralist, biographer, calligrapher, and he was a staunch devotee of Anglican and a committed to Tory. Tories is it's ideological parties which in England. So the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography calls him arguably the most distinguished man of letters in English history. James Boswell's Life of Samuel was selected by Johnson biographer Walter Jackson Bade the most famous single work of biographical art in the whole of literature. So Walter Jackson wrote the biography of Samuel Johnson, which is considered to be the most famous biography. And our main text for today is history of Rasellas, and this is the quote. The idea of prince condemned to happy imprisonment has resonance. Johnson himself was probably ignorant of it, and in the legend of Buddha, though it would have reached him through the story of Balaam and Josaphat. Story is according to the legend, an Indian king persecuted the Christian church in his realm. After astrologers predicted that his own son would some day become a Christian, the king imprisoned the young Prince Josaphat, who nevertheless met the hermit Saint Balaam and converted to Christianity. Adopted as a subject of one of the idea of prince who has been brought up to surrounded and artificial happiness. So this quote is given by George Lewis. And you know what is this significant? Why this quote is so significant? Because this story is very much related to Buddha, the life of Buddha, when he renounced his married life and he moves for the in search of knowledge and enlightenment. So the Prince of Abyssinia and the story of history of Rasellas, what is the theme? Main theme of this is that the prince also he want to give the convenient life which is real living. And there is one thing Buddha says, that the real cause of unhappiness and pain is desire. We keep on desiring, we keep on thinking, we keep on wishing, and that's what we want everything with us. So this is the real cause. And if a man or a human being is able to control his wishes, unwanted wishes, imaginary wishes, then we can come out of many problems. So this quote, I again repeat it. The idea of prince condemned to happy imprisonment has resonance. So happy imprisonment means he is living a happy life, but somewhere it is imprisonment of the desires, because he want to be there in that particular life always. And this Rasellas, the fourth son of King Abyssinia, modern day Ethiopia, is shut up in a beautiful valley called Happy Valley, till the order of succession should call him to the throne. Rasellas enlisted the help of an artist who is also known as engineer to help with his escape from the valley and plunging out through the air. Though they are unsuccessful in this attempt, Rasellas grows weary of fictitious entertainment of the place, and after much brooding escape with his sister Nekaya, her attendant Pikua, and his poet friend Imlak by digging under the wall of the valley. They are to see the world and search for happiness in place such as Cairo and Suez. After a sojourn in Egypt, where they encounter various classes of society and undergo a few adventures, they perceive the futility of their search and return to Abyssinia after none of their hopes of happiness are achieved. So this is a kind of futile journey. Okay, so they escape from the valley and then they are in search of the happiness, which is considered to be the unsuccessful attempt, and that's how the story moves on. So that's what the story is. Preliminary episodic. According to Borges, Johnson wrote this book in such a slow musical style in which all the sentences are perfectly balanced. There is not a single sentence that ends abruptly, and we find a monotonous but very agile music. And this is what Johnson wrote while he was thinking about the death of his mother, whom he loved so much. So when we go for the critical interpretation of this history of Rasellas, what is there? Irvin Ehren Press sees an aged Johnson reflecting on lost youth in character of Rasellas, who is exiled from Happy Valley. Rasellas has also been viewed as a reflection of Johnson's melancholia projected on the wider world, particularly at the time of his mother's death, and some have interpreted the work as an expression of Johnson's Christian belief, arguing that the work expresses the impossibility of finding happiness in life on earth and asks the readers to look to the God for ultimate satisfaction. Hester's Poesie. In part, Johnson in the character of Imal, who is rejected in his courtship by a class-conscious social superior. Thomas Kiemer sees beyond the conventional interpretations to call it work that reflects the wider geopolitical world in the year of publication, 1759. So that also we have to remember that History of Rasellas was written in 1759. The hostility to the rising imperialism of his day and to reject stereotypical Orientalist viewpoint that justify colonialism. Johnson himself was regarded as a prophet who opposed imperialism, who described Anglo-French War of America as a dispute between two thieves over the proceeds of a robbery. So the character and the belief of Johnson is something very democratic, and he doesn't believe in imperialism. And when by this time, this imperialism was on a high note. So that's how he's criticizing it. And then through the life of Rasellas, through the history and life of Rasellas, is trying to bring out human being on a rational footing, where we become irrational by desiring so many things which are unnecessary and wanted in our life, and they create misery and unhappiness. So when we go for the Orientalistic interpretation or Orientalism in history of Rasellas, what is that? Johnson follows a tradition of academic students of Orientalism in 18th century. West of the Oriental studies, which mainly focus on the Turkish language, culture, institutions and Islam. This tradition of study shows up in Rasellas through the use of Islamic imla, who has travelled to the West and seen its advancement. This led to philosophical comparison between the West and the East in the story, though through this Johnson implies that the West is superior to the East, using Imlaq as a mouthpiece. So Imlaq, the character, he is always advocating and appreciating Western culture over the Eastern culture. So Eastern culture is somewhere represented in a shadow manner. This is not very positively reflected here. This negative portrayal of the East is done in the beginning of the story with the description of the Happy Valley. This description details how this place is meant to be paradise or utopia, but also alluded to the idea of prison. This setting, coupled with the Western idea of happiness sees in Rasellas, bring out a portrayal of Arab and Muslim culture as a being oppressive. However, this is really a result of Johnson's portrayal of the East using English idea. So the portrayal of the Eastern or the Muslim culture is being represented as a oppressive. Maybe Muslims are not giving much liberty and expression to the other people. So this is what it is being represented, and that's how the negativity of the culture is being represented here. History of Rasellas, while the story is thematically similar to Candid Candide by Voltaire, also published early in 1759. Both concern young men traveling in the company of honored teacher, encountering and examining human suffering in an attempt to determine the root of happiness. Their root concerns are distinctly different. Voltaire was very directly satiring the widely read philosophical work of Gottfried Leibniz, particularly Theodicee, in which Leibniz asserts that the world, no matter how we may perceive it, is necessarily the best of all possible world. In contrast, the question Rasellas confront most directly is whether or not humanity is essentially capable of attaining happiness. Rasellas' question is his choice in life and what new choice to make in order to achieve this happiness. Writing as a devoted Christian, Johnson makes through his character no blanket attack on the visibility of a religious response to his question. As Voltaire does, while the story is in places light and humorous, it is not a piece of satire as Candide. So Borges thought Candide a much more brilliant book than Rasellas, yet the latter was more convincing in its rejection of human happiness. A world in which Candide, which is delicious work full of jokes, existed can't be such a terrible world. Because surely when Voltaire wrote Candide, he did feel the world was so terrible. He was expounding a thesis on and was having a lot of fun doing so. On the contrary, in Rasellas, we feel Johnson's melancholy. We feel that for him life is essentially horrible. Origin and influences. At the age of 50, Johnson wrote the piece in only one intended week to help pay the cost of his mother's funeral, intending to complete it on 22nd January 1759, the eve of his mother's death. Johnson is believed to have received the total of £75 for the copyright, though this is still popular belief. Wharton and Mayerson book, Samuel, Johnson and Theme of Hope. Now please remember the names: Wharton and Mayerson's book, Samuel, Johnson and the Theme of Hope. Explain James Boswell, the author who wrote James' biography. So who wrote Johnson's biography? James Boswell. James Boswell wrote Johnson's biography. James Boswell wrote Johnson's biography. Was entirely wrong in supposing that Rasellas was written soon after his mother's death. It wasn't a way of defraying the expenses of the funeral. In the Johnson wrote Rasellas instead of going to see his mother while she was still alive. It was written in anticipation of her funeral. Edward Tomarken writes in his book Johnson, Rasellas and the Choice of Criticism. So this another writer, please remember, Edward Tomarken, and the book is Johnson, Rasellas and the Choice of Criticism. That this belief was not questioned until 1927. The tradition of the gloomy funeral tone of the choice of life motif in Rasellas remained unopposed. The question of whether or not the genesis of Rasellas involved in a literal funeral was not considered important. Moreover, the assumption of a gloomy genesis served to keep religion in the background, for any theological difficulty could be attributed to the fact that the author was mourning the death of his mother. So according to Wendy L. Belcher, when Johnson sent his manuscript to the publisher, he titled the work The History of Prince of Abyssinia, which suggested that he had still not decided on the name of his protagonist. It is Belcher's argument that Johnson coined the name Rasellas for its symbolic meaning, not in phonetic relation to the Catholic princes. Rasellas. So since Ras means prince and Sela means portrait, Johnson may have invented the term portrait of a prince as an evocative name of his main character.